All right. I think we are ready and live. Let me just head on over to Facebook so I can um, make sure if anyone has questions that we can see it. So, how are you today, Monica?
Good. How are you?
I am great. I'm excited about today and our
Me
conversation.
too. Me too. Me too.
Because, like, you're doing like all kinds of awesome stuff here in Charlotte.
Well, not alone. Let's be very clear about that. Trying to, but definitely not alone. It takes a village.
It does. And that's like, I think some of the fun stuff about the work, right, is that we get to work with people.
Yeah.
And I think, and I know that this is just like not true, but sometimes it feels like, or people might have the perception that like working with cities, there isn't really collaborative, right? Because of the structure.
Right.
Being like group, like not a one person show, or like the whole idea of this collaborative spirit being present. Sometimes people don't get that.
Oh, it is. I mean, I've only worked for one city, but
Mhm.
it is like very collaborative, like very collaborative. My work is, and my team's work. Oh my gosh, we probably talk to like five other city departments like every day. It's like
See,
crazy the amount of other just people that you need along the way to help to make things happen.
right.
Yeah.
It is 3 o'clock ish, 3:02. So we're gonna kind of into the conversation a bit. And since we're talking about cities, the whole idea of like what it is to work with a city, and that you are this awesome collaborative spirit. To quickly lay a foundation for folks that are joining us, my name is Janelle Logan. I'm the executive director for the League of Creative Interventionists, and we are an organization that partners creatives with community to really think about finding kind of creative solutions to some of our neighborhood challenges, or even to like highlight some of the wonderful things that exist. And our intention is always to work together to build a better city. And so I'm super excited to talk to Monica today, who I've known in kind of various capacities.
For a long time.
I know, it's crazy, like when I start to think about like, wow, we've been connected for this long. And for those of you who do not know Monica Holmes, she's the manager of the Urbann Design Center for the city of Charlotte. And so, Monica, first, thank you for like agreeing to be a part of this conversation.
Of course.
I think it's so great because you can provide an amazing perspective from a community standpoint, from someone who personally is invested in the city and kind of changing the way things happen, and from a city perspective on how like we can all creatively work together to build fantastic cities. And in this moment where a lot of us are kind of questioning like what happens next and how do we do this and what do things look like on the other side, having this kind of conversation and getting people to think about, what can we do? And when we're ready, how can we do this? I think it is super important. So thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I was super excited when you asked me. I mean, when you love what you do, it's always fun to get to talk about the work and all the things around it and how we can all work together. How can we do things differently? All those things. I love all those things.
Yay.
More of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So a couple of housekeeping things. We are on Facebook Live. So if anyone has a question, please type it into the feed and then I'll read them to Monica to share. So feel free to type it at any moment and I'll just occasionally shift to check that out. And then otherwise, Monica, why don't you tell folks about you? Like share with us a little bit about who you are.
So we'll do this in hopefully like a minute or less, 30 seconds or less. So I'm actually I'm a native Charlottean. So I like to preface that with I have a lot of love for Charlotte. A lot of things I think can improve. Let me be really honest, but a lot of love for it. And so I worked for the city of Charlotte for almost in a couple of weeks, it'll be 5 years.
Wow.
And before I worked for the city, I worked all in private sector. So for like architecture firms and planning firms, basically, they do like urban design, how we build cities. So I came to the city really to help build an urban design center. And so now I manage the urban design center. We have three major components of the work that we do. First of all, we're in the planning department, which is um, a pretty diverse, large department that kind of does everything from like building inspections to, like the comprehensive vision of the city. And we have three major components to urban design. So we at the Urban Design Center, number one, we do a lot of like placemaking and kind of artist work, which is what we're going to talk most about today. And that's really all geared around public space and the public realm and how we create great places and improve the places we already have with creativity. We also do a lot of work around like corridors and urban design. So looking at like how do we, where do we put in new sidewalks? What do the buildings look like? Where do the buildings go? All that kind of work. And then our last piece is really outreach based and just like education to the community about why urban design matters, why placemaking matters, and how we can kind of do that in an engaging way. So that's my spiel. We're a team of 6 people, and everyone is super talented and loves what they do. So I'm really lucky in that regard.
And can you talk a little bit about like, does every city have like an urban design department?
It just totally depends. So I spent some time kind of like researching this to figure out like how much do other people have. And so one thing is like in the Southeast, at least, we have actually a coordinated group we call it SUDS, which that's not like dirty laundry. That's Southeastern Urban Design Summit. So all the Southeastern cities that have urban design centers are Charlotte, Raleigh, Charleston, Chattanooga, Atlanta, Miami. So our organization is kind of loosely Charleston, Chattanooga, Raleigh, Atlanta. We are getting ready to add Asheville, and I've met the Miami people and I'm trying to convince them to come along. But so anyways, that gives you a good indication of kind of like how it is. And I think regionally would probably be about the same.
So, and how long, so when we think about kind of these urban design kind of centers and the work specifically that's happening in Charlotte, why are they important? Like, why are cities, or should cities, if you feel that they should, be invested in creativity?
Well, I think that one, I mean, let's be honest, I'm of course biased because I think I'm creative, but creatives are problem solvers. So I think that there's like an aspect of problem solving that maybe kind of the traditional government, what you would perceive to be the traditional government employee, there's an energy that a creative person brings to that and like a different approach to the problem solving that I think is like adds a lot of value. It adds value in like looking for different solutions, quicker solutions, maybe something that's out of the box that people haven't thought of before. So I think that's really honestly created like a big growth in our kind of specialty over the past like 10 to 15 years. I think that most people, if you went through like a design training and kind of got that education, were brought up that way, you tend to be like a community collaborator. So you're really invested in like the voice of communities in your work. So that kind of plays into it too. And also I think adds value. But I think those two things, and also, I mean, it's the physical space. So it's like, when you walk around a city, it literally is what you experience. So people find value in that and find value in quality in that. So when you're an expertise in that quality, it is like a value add to cities.
And so as you're talking, I'm like, I have all these questions, and then like I don't want to ask like all of them because I want to leave space and we have a finite amount of time. But like one of the things that you talked about, two things that I want to talk about. One, you said that creatives are people who think outside of the box, and it helps cities kind of think outside of that box.
Yeah.
But I think at the same time, can you talk a little bit about like out of the box thinking and like the system that is the city and like the rules and regulations and spaces where they bump, but then also, I know, right? And then, but also like spaces where that can like really kind of grow into something that is fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I think, they can bump, period. They cannot be necessarily always the best. We're not really good at moving quickly. So sometimes I think that if you're like a creative who works in government, you kind of have to figure out like how to navigate like that system of like, oh, okay, so these are my allies and like people that I can talk to that can give me, that also are like-minded and want to really think about solutions. And so, I mean, I've become an expert in like going to those people. So it is, I mean, yeah, it's kind of cheating, but it's really not. It's like, and also kind of an expert of like knowing when to like prod people from outside too, to like, yes, you should do that. You should bring that question up. You should like send that email. You should like, do that project. When I think that like we maybe can't move the needle in the way that you might want to, like from the inside. Sometimes, let's be honest, it takes like some outside influence to kind of move things quickly. So it's a little bit of a balance. Like an interesting story on that that I'll tell is so I really like I think street murals are really awesome. They're they're pretty cool. So one day I had only worked at the city maybe for like 6 months or so, and I kind of knew I had a couple meetings with somebody in like our transportation department that I knew was like kind of in charge of like whether or not you could do street murals. And so the mayor at the time was Jennifer Roberts. And this person just like roguely painted a street mural, and they took pictures of it with the mayor, like, because the mayor lived in the neighborhood. They took pictures of it with the mayor. And so I get on the elevator one morning and I see this woman who like, we now work together like closely. And I was like, oh my gosh, have you seen the street mural that's over in Elizabeth? And the mayor's like in all the pictures, and it like was not allowed at all. And the look on her face, like all the blood drained from her face. She was like, what? And then interestingly enough, like 2 months later, we had written a whole manual on street murals and how to allow them. And like now we totally allow them. Anyways, like it took someone from outside to like just do it. And the whole neighborhood loved it. And the mayor, everybody loved it. And then it's like, and now we have street murals.
We have a fair number of street murals that are beautiful.
Yeah, they're nice.
Yeah. So, okay, I have another question for you. So have you seen, and this is actually a great example, like of like someone from outside kind of doing something and then the city kind of comes on board, right?
Yeah.
But have you seen cities collaborate with creatives to generate solutions or to create kind of new opportunities for residents? And so I love the street mural. We've seen a lot of opportunities now kind of come out of that event.
Yeah.
What are other places that you've seen that? And even like, what are some of your favorites?
Interesting. So, I mean, opportunities for creatives have kind of grown. So there's been even more recently a lot of opportunities. Like we've been doing a lot of grant opportunities, kind of where it's like, bring us your idea. And I feel like as much as that seems like really open door, that's honestly led to a lot of really great projects, because people who live in neighborhoods and creatives who walk around the city every day, like have a lot of ideas that there's no way that like my team could know those. So I think that's been interesting to collaborate, because somebody might have an idea, but they don't know how to do it. And like what we're skilled at doing is like being able to help you figure out how to do it. So there's been a lot of collaboration that way. So a couple of my favorite projects that are around that are, we have a couple actually getting ready to come online that are in this year's like grant winners, where people basically, and actually there's one going in NODA right now, but where like it's a combination of like traffic calming and public art and like something that happens like really quickly. So they're basically taking like leftover spaces in corners. Like if the corner is like too rounded and cars go too fast around the corner, they basically like put in these little temporary like things that make you not drive there, and then they paint a mural in that like leftover space. And so it's like a street mural, but it's also like makes you slow down and like so that you can't turn as fast. And so we have probably like 3 or 4 of those going in around the city right now. And like that project would be so boring if it wasn't for like the creative. Like it would just be like little bumps on the street and you'd be like, why are those there? But now it's like, oh man, this is like it just pops, you know. It's really like much more exciting. I think around music there's been a lot of innovation too, like how we can have more like street performances, and that's kind of a different type of than people like typically think of when you think of like art in cities. But it's something that's like I think we're just beginning to figure out like how does that work and how can we plug it in more, because it's so important.
Right. And so some of what you're talking about, I think people would define as placemaking. So like, so can you talk a little bit about your relationship and interest with placemaking and the city's kind of formal connection to placemaking projects?
Sure. So my interest honestly probably started about like 12 to 15 years ago. A colleague of mine at the first place I worked at a graduate school basically like started the whole kind of he started the tactical urbanism movement. He like made up that term. And we were like interns together when we were like 25. So anyways, when we were much younger. So I got really interested in that. And then I feel like the art and creative part kind of layered in. Like at first I was really focused on like, how can you do things quickly and be responsive to community needs, especially like during the recession years. That became like super important because, you know, all the money went away for doing these like really big projects. And it was like, well, and I feel like we're starting to get there again. It's like creatives really add a lot of value because it's not these like $50 million big things, right? You can see change like with smaller budgets in a more impactful way. So I kind of got interested in that. I was thinking about it when you asked the question. 2012, I organized like the first parking day in the Charlotte region, which is where you take a parking space and turn it into like a little parklet. And then from there, I mean, you know, when I joined the city, it just like got crazy interested in it. I found other people who worked in like 8 other city departments. All of us worked in different departments, and we formed a placemaking team that like roguely started meeting. Then we made a whole handbook and we made a website for our handbook. And then we started encouraging people to like do the things in our handbook. And then the city manager, who is a wonderful person, thought that the work we were doing was interesting and started giving us money to do it. And so anyways, for the past 3 years, the past 2 years, we've had $250,000 a year to do placemaking projects. And so that's kind of really what has grown our program from just like kind of searching for ways to incorporate these types of projects to like a pot of money that we can spend every year kind of doing this work. So anyways, now that's what we'll continue doing this coming year. We're hoping in the budget, we have $500,000 to do this type of work in corridors in the proposed budget. And so, you know, it just continues.
So if people are interested in kind of joining you in this work, and I think that's one of the things we definitely want to elevate. One, how would you recommend that they do that? And then two, how do they prepare themselves to kind of to do this work or to be ready to take advantage of some of these issues? And then I'll ask a different question after that.
Yeah, so I mean, just like baseline logistics, like follow on social media, stay like aware on the city's website and on like our Urban Design Center stuff of when opportunities come, because we always like push it out and try to send it to everybody. That's like just baseline. I think actually being prepared to do the work is a little bit different per se than just like, seeing the ad and like submitting designs or whatever it may be. I mean, I really think like getting involved at a neighborhood level first and understanding like neighborhood dynamics and community dynamics is really important, especially, and I think all cities are like this, but there's a lot of people who invest a lot of time in their community and in their neighborhood. And like, you really have to kind of respect that when you're doing work there. And it's not easy work. I mean, I have had a lot of lessons learned over the years and continue to learn them about how to work in neighborhoods and how to work in communities. Because let's be honest, if you don't live there, no matter what value you bring, you're going to learn a lot, and there's stuff you're not going to know. So that's the other thing I would highly recommend is like really understanding neighborhoods.
And where have you seen that, like, because it is something that we run into in our work as well, the idea that people are well-intentioned or wanting to work with community, but they don't come from that space. Now, just because you don't come from there doesn't mean that you're going to fail.
Right.
Can you talk about just a little bit, I think, about what you have seen as a challenge and how people can kind of navigate that space as a creative who wants to, let's say, work with a community?
Yeah, I mean, there's like several challenges. One is like understanding and knowing kind of the history of the space and what's been done there before, and kind of respecting that. I mean, even you can do, I'm kind of dealing with this right now. You can do a ton of engagement, think you've done all the right things, but there still might be kind of things in the history of engagement in that neighborhood that are like difficult to overcome, right? So like, I think just like knowing that it's not going to be easy and it's likely going to be rocky is like just a fact. A fact of it. Like that's just the way it's going to likely be. I mean, I think being really transparent in like the questions you ask and how you are incorporating them in your work or not incorporating them in your work is really important. Like we run into a lot of issues where creatives ask questions, but then they don't like know necessarily how to incorporate the feedback into like into a design. And so there's not necessarily like it's not a one-to-one. Like if you ask people like what should go in this on this street, right? And they give you a bunch of answers, like you need to ask the question so that like you're prepared to incorporate whatever answers people give you like into the work,
Right.
So it's like sometimes open-ended questions, like if you're not prepared for like all the open-ended answers,
right,
like you gotta, so that's like really hard. That's like a real big challenge when people aren't used to working in communities and like don't necessarily kind of know what they're getting into. So people want to see their work, their if they are giving their time and effort to give you feedback, they want to see that like reflected in the product, right?
Yeah. And I think that's that space, and we've experienced this too, where it's like the creative process, which often can guide someone who is creative, and the realities of the people who have to live with the work, or even the creation in partnership with people. Like there's sometimes that gap.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there are two questions that have come in for you. The first is from Alex. She says, "Hi, Monica."
Hi.
So how do you think placemaking, public art, and urban design can drive cultural change to build support for big policy change around social, economic, and environmental challenges?
Ooh, that's a lot, like heavy. Yeah, that's heavy.
Go.
I mean, I think that the policy challenges are difficult because I mean, policy can be in so many different, uh, like that can sit in so many different areas, right?
Mhm.
Like there's sustainability policy, there's like growth policy. So thinking about how we influence that, uh, I have seen it more successfully, more the inverse. Like people have policy ideas, and placemaking has turned into like a manifestation of a way to like test those ideas and see them kind of come to life a little bit. So I think that messaging and education is like one way, clearly, that like placemaking and kind of this type of work can impact policy changes, especially around like equity, sustainability. When you're thinking about, like some people don't really, they don't understand what equity means, right? But if you see like a mural, a public, like you see it, or you see like a creative expression of it, there's a different impact. So I think that there's the ability to do that. I think we probably need to continue working like to understand exactly like how really clear links could be made to like very specific policies. Because right now I see our work as really being a link and expression to what people want their city, their future, their vision to be. And then it's like tying that to the policies that get that on a much grander scale, right?
Right. And another question for you is, what is your biggest challenge in your role?
Whew. On a day-to-day, well, right now I was telling you earlier, we're in COVID craziness. So it's figuring out like, honestly, on a daily basis, I deal with projects that are like billion-dollar transit projects that are 10 years away. And then I deal with things that are like $500 like street mural projects, and my team is dealing with like that spectrum all the time, basically. So like this morning we were dealing with like Sherwin-Williams paint palettes, right? And then we're also designing like a future transit station. So
wow,
it's a big challenge, and I like it to like kind of switch back and forth between those and like the whole spectrum in between. Also just being like responsive and kind of shifting work constantly based on community need is like, that's a super challenge right now. Like we are in the middle of like launching this artist street mural program, like in response to COVID. And so it's been a challenge. I mean, you know, like, oh, we're going to do 20 murals in 3 weeks. Okay.
Oh
let's,
my gosh.
you know, just the literal logistics of things like that are,
right.
I mean, it's fun, but also hard.
And during the crisis, yeah, and while working in other non-traditional spaces, yeah.
I mean, I'll be honest with you too. Like, I wish that Charlotte is a very geographically big city, so I wish we could be able to do it. I mean, we honestly don't have capacity to do projects everywhere that we would want to, you know? So people who scream the loudest often get the most attention, and that's a challenge. I wish it was, that bothers me personally, and I wish that there was more we could do about it.
And do you think, I know you can't like foresee all of the future, or some of the future, like I'm like, you are be all feel, but I think in kind of looking at what cities are doing, and you have this kind of broader context, do you, like, how do you imagine cities working with creatives in the future?
I mean, I think it's going to continue. You know, a couple of cities have started like with an artist in residence program that literally
Mm-hmm.
sits at a very high level of really embedding creatives like in a high level position to look at like just how cities run. I think
Mm-hmm.
things like that are going to continue because I think that there is an intersection of, and I think youth culture, which I mean, I don't know if I'm necessarily still in, but a lot of younger people who work in government are like very multidisciplinary, very multi-talented, a much wider range. They are like, you know, they are collaborators at heart. They bring in like all this kind of creativity. So I think that it's only going to continue. And I think that we're like at the tip of the iceberg and kind of where they sit. I think planning is like a logical place. You know,
Mm-hmm.
sustainability is fairly logical. So is equity. So is like our, you know, diversity and equity kind of departments. But I think you're going to see more and more like in engineering, in transportation, like that there's going to be more opportunities for like creatives to plug in
Mm-hmm.
other ways, right? Stormwater. I mean, stormwater could be like a whole untapped, like water as an art form, or how do you, anyways, like there's so many interesting things to that.
Right. So I was looking in here, you're getting a lot of like praise, how fabulous you are. Manoj and a number of people have said, we are lucky to have you here in Charlotte. And I totally agree with that and believe in that.
Thanks.
I think if you can talk a little bit, because you mentioned this kind of shift, right? So how younger folks who have more kind of an interdisciplinary approach to training and probably life in general are kind of coming into the city in more formal roles. No, Manoj, don't be sorry about the long comment. It's beautiful. So like, it seems like it might create pressure points or spaces where cities and ultimately residents will need to grow or adjust. And at times we're kind of afraid of change. How would you encourage us as creatives to stick in there, as people who have a interdisciplinary approach? How do you, like, what is the encouragement? Like, what do you see happening at the end of this? If you could like look in your crystal ball. But then also kind of like in the more immediate, like how does that affect the way that we operate in, live with, and transform our cities?
Yeah.
That might be a hard question, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in the immediate future, I think that the positive is that, I mean, everybody's aware of kind of all the changes that are occurring, at least somewhat with COVID. But I think in the immediate future, the interesting thing is that we are like speeding up a lot of change that was already kind of on the like happening, right? So the good part about that is that I feel like it's kind of a forced hand to make us respond quickly to come up with more creative solutions. And so I think that in the next like 2 to 3 years, like we're going to continue to like push that pretty quickly. I think in the city of Charlotte, at least in the past like 2 to 3 years, we've had a big culture shift that has really come from like our city manager and city council that is very like action oriented and a lot less. I think historically government like was very scared to fail at anything. And we've been encouraged a lot. I've personally feel like I've been very encouraged to like fail fast and learn and don't do it a second time. But, you know, but this like kind of sense of action and like get out there make change, like show me what you can do with it. And so, I mean, I'm riding that. I'm hopeful that we're staying in that lane for like, at least through COVID and the like recovery from it, because we're going to have to, like act fast because things change quickly, right? They're just completely changing rapidly. So I'm hopeful that government is going to stay there. Staying in the change fast, act quickly lane.
Right. So if people have questions, please do not forget to type them into the comments. We'll be on here for a little bit more, and I have a couple more questions, but I definitely want to make sure that your questions are included in the conversation. So go ahead and type them in the comments, and I will share them with Monica. So I think we've talked a lot about like what cities are doing, and kind of what people, what creative, based on like some of the experience that you've had with the people that you're working with, where some of the sticky points are and some of the great successes are. So that is kind of fantastic.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think would be super helpful for people who are interested in doing this work or who are already doing this work, and we already had a question about like connecting to policy. This isn't the exact right question, but if I'm an artist and I'm like, hey, other than like getting the mayor to stand next to some stuff that I've done already, right?
One tactic.
Yeah. What are some of the things that I can do to really kind of partner with, get audience with, connect with cities, whether it's here in Charlotte or somewhere else, to kind of share my desire, my skill set, to maybe help develop a placemaking program, or even to qualify for some of the city things. I know that, well, I won't say what I know. So, but that's I think that's the question. Like, what is that?
So, I have been thinking about this a little bit. So one is kind of the coalition building like component of it, at least in city work specifically. So there's a coalition building component to it, right? Like we've kind of talked about this. Like if you are just kind of like a single artist wanting to do like a single kind of design idea, it is going to be a struggle, right? To be in a kind of city space, because there's an expectation in the city space that there's a coalition of support, that you have a neighborhood support, you are really kind of thinking a little bit about like who are your teammates, right? So I think if you have an idea, even if it's not in this city, in another city, like that's important. Like the idea that there are others with a diverse background that kind of believe in this as an idea or as a creative like addition to a city, that's important. I know I've told you this before, but honestly, sometimes it's like if you feel like you're in a wall, like the go rogue mentality can also like, not that the mayor has to stand with you, but like that also works. So I mean, don't break laws. I'm not encouraging you to break like, laws, but I mean, the go rogue approach, if your idea is good enough and you just do it, I mean, usually that honestly like pays off, right? Like people, it gets attention. People are like, I don't know why we thought this was a bad idea anyways. I mean, there's a sense of like the go rogue approach is not always wrong, right? So sometimes I would just say, just do it. I mean, I think that it's also like finding, if you're in another city, I honestly would like start reaching out to people and like have one-on-one conversations with them, because like when I first started at the city, there's 8,000 people who work for the city of Charlotte. I was like one person in the planning department. No one did this type of work at all in the planning department. And I just like happenstance, like met a person who worked in the city manager's office who was also interested in this kind of work. And then I knew another person who worked in transportation. And then the next thing you know, there was a coalition of like 8 to 12 of us who kind of had each other. And so if you can find that door, you know, it's just like finding the opening to the door, basically.
Right.
You know, so sometimes, I mean, honestly, it's like you just have got to find like the common thread in the open door and like continue to chase it a little bit. And then, you know, next thing you know, you might be like running a whole program to do it or whatever. But I mean, it really is like, it's not easy per se, but those are kind of my like quick 3 if I had to give people advice.
But one of the things, and I am totally of the Go Rogue school, which is interesting. But you also said don't break any laws. Where can people find like and it's honest and it's so important. Where can people kind of find the laws, right, that they don't necessarily want to break, and how? Not that, so if because I was going to say, and don't answer this part of the question. I was like, and then how can they finesse it? But don't answer that. Don't do that. So, but how can people kind of find the laws that they shouldn't break? And then, I
mean, so honestly, I would say, referring back to my third point, which is find the people who are somewhat like-minded that work for the government, that you kind of, you know, build trust with, that are going to tell you like, and then you pick up the phone and you call them and you say, hey, I want to do this. Like, what are the rules around this or not? Like, are there rules around this? Because there's a lot more gray area too than I think people realize, like where there are things that are like that you can definitely not do, you know, X you can definitely not do, but Y, like, I'm not really sure about, like, I can't see anything that like makes it a terrible idea. Like, we've never done it before, but you know, that doesn't sound like a bad idea. So I think that it's kind of like, you've got to find who the allies are that can help you a little bit with the strategy, and, you know, just like vetting the ideas a little bit. Cause you're right. I mean, nobody intentionally wants to really get themselves in trouble in a real way. Right.
Right.
But it's hard to figure out sometimes. That's why I say, like, pick up the phone and call people, because it is hard to navigate. Like, that is honestly, our whole team is like built to help people navigate like complex projects, because it's hard. And then we try to change the process to make it easier.
But I think that's important, right? Because I don't know that people really kind of understand that your team and similar teams in other cities actually exist to answer those questions or to make things possible, right? There's that dynamic oftentimes where people think of government systems being limiting, but that there actually are these pockets of people that are there to help make these things happen.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and that was the whole, like, when we first started the program and created like the hub website and started doing all the tools. One, it was to get all the processes like just written down so that people could like click on a website and like read the 5 steps that you need to do to like be able to do something. But then our second step was to figure out, like, to your point, like, can we make any of these easier? Is there something about these that like is really unnecessary? Like, do you really need to have, you know, these things signed like 4 times? Is 1 time enough? You know, it's like, and we're still working on it. It's a work in progress. We'll like add, but yes, there are teams like all across the country who it should be their job. Remember, government, we're here to serve you, the public. It should be their job to make things easier, not harder.
Okay. So can you, before we go, this is, if you have questions, again, this is kind of, as we're winding down, an opportunity to get those last questions in. Can you just talk a little bit about the opportunities that exist here in Charlotte, even though the RFP or the grant might not be open at the moment, things that people should look out for. And then after that, if you can also just remind us of the cities in the SUDS.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
SUDS, just for people who might not be in Charlotte, but are in the Southeast, who are looking for folks like you.
Yeah, sure. So opportunities in the city of Charlotte. So we actually, they're both closed right now, but we have an artist pool that we have currently. I believe it's 30, it's either 30 or 33 artists that are like in our artist pool that basically we'll open it at a minimum once annually for like a month or so, where you can just kind of submit. And as long as you're a local artist, I mean, you're pretty much going to get in. And that gives us the ability to be able to kind of like when we have a project, quick release something and get designs back. So we have that. It closed on April 26th. But like I said, there's a chance if it's successful that we reopen it like more frequently. So stay tuned for that. The grants projects, we just announced our grants for this year. July 1st, the new fiscal year goes into place. So it's my hope that we can do another round of grants like sooner rather than later. So stay tuned for those. And those can be artists, nonprofit, like you don't have to be, it can even be businesses, neighborhoods, like that is a really wide range of people who can apply for it, which is great. Now, granted, again, back to the coalition, you have to have a coalition of people. There are other projects, and that probably will continue, that are like kind of one-off projects where we'll do a call for artists because there is a specific like desire from the neighborhood or a reason why we can't use the artist pool. You know, they might want a wider range of choices or whatever. So stay tuned for that. There's also we are working on the shared streets program, and we work in the open streets program. And so there's also kind of opportunities related to those and just doing different creative things. And honestly, if you're watching this and you have a really awesome idea that you think should be a project, I mean, we're doing a huge project right now called the Urban Arboretum Trail with a couple of neighborhoods on the west side, Oakland Park and McCrory Heights in that area. And honestly, residents in the neighborhood brought us the idea, and it's now become this huge project. So if you have a really great creative idea, you know, I mean, there's really kind of always some opportunity. I can't promise, you know, tons of money, but I can promise that we'll take a good close look at it and we'll work on it, you know, as we can. So there's always that too.
That's fantastic. And how should people be in touch, or where should they look for these opportunities online?
So you can follow us on the Charlotte Urban Design Center. We have an Instagram feed. We have a Facebook page. You can also just email, if you go to charlottenc.gov/placemaking, that's where our placemaking website lives. And you can also just always email placemaking@charlottenc.gov. That's our like email address, and it goes to myself and like 3 other people who kind of all work in the program. So anyways, that's like an easy way. If you have an idea or you want to set up a meeting or you want to get in touch, you can just reach out there too.
That's fantastic. Oh, wait. Yes, listen to you. Oh, yay. Malcolm from Mufti Games, who actually was on a couple of weeks ago. He said, it's really inspiring to get your take on this. Your openness and excitement is brilliant. Loads of ideas sparking. So that's all we can ask for. That's definitely the intent behind all of these conversations. Yeah. And the fabulous people that come on, Monica.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate, I mean, you know, I could sing your praises all day long because I love working together. So, you know.
No, so thank you so much for this. I think it's super helpful to really have a perspective and to hear someone who is like in city government kind of talk about this. And I love the idea that coalition building, I think, is critical and key in a lot of this work. And so I love elevating that. I also love going rogue, but we already know about that part. But this is incredibly helpful. Is there anything, as we start to really kind of wrap up, that you would love to share kind of with people that are doing this work?
I think it's very fresh in my mind, but with all the COVID stuff going on, I would really encourage everyone to stay tuned and look for opportunities, because I have already seen, I know we're working on some. The city of Philadelphia reached out to me about setting up a program in Philadelphia around work that they could do to support creatives and artists. I know Phoenix just passed a bunch of support and new programs. So that might not be exactly what you were asking, but if people are watching, I would totally keep your eyes peeled, because I think that there's going to be a continued, like I said, shift of focus and resources and an opportunity for us all to do really amazing, cool things in a time where we probably all need it, and we need something uplifting and positive, right, to kind of get us over the hump. So yeah, stay tuned. I know you'll be hearing stuff coming out from us, and I know other cities are working on it too.
Thank you for that. And thank you for really kind of sharing the idea that not only here, but other places will be looking for people.
Yeah, I think for sure.
Yeah, so that's super important. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Janelle. The work you guys do is, I feel like you guys are a wonderful partner, and, it takes both sides. So whatever we can do to support your work, I'm there.
Thank you. Same here. And so before we go, just a couple of little things, or not even little things. So, we're doing these conversations since we can't get together and hug up on each other and change the world physically together. So we have two more that are coming up. Well, we have a few more that are coming up, but the next two, actually Alex Alcorn, who
Yay,
is one of our fellows. And so she's doing a talk this Saturday, May 16th at 2. And it's the second part of a 3-part series that she's doing on upcycling and creative reuse. Sorry, I had a little pause in my throat. And she'll be on with the Green Assistant. And so we're really excited about that. And then next week on the 20th, our other fellow, Brandon Ruiz, who is really around food sovereignty and food justice, is doing his second of a 3-part series on food sovereignty, and he's focusing on at-home herbalism. So all the herbs that we're all growing just because we think we should be right now, we'll actually find other things to do with it other than to sprinkle it on, I don't know, whatever is sprinkling it on.
Yeah. I need to come to that one. We've got a lot of herbs going in our yard. The basil's out of control right now.
Yeah, I have a sage bush and I don't know what to do. So hopefully Brandon will have resources for all of us to think creatively about what we're doing with the food that we are producing. So thank you again. And thank you all for coming. This video will be on Facebook, of course. And then we're also putting it on our YouTube page, so people can look at it at their leisure and refer back to a lot of the great information that you provided for us today.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janelle. Thank you, everybody. Y'all have a good one.
You too.
Okay, bye.
Bye.